We're going to look at the third method of using an if statement. So if I go back to our page, we're going to look at this one here, the if, else if, else statement. So there's three parts to it. Now the important part about this is actually we can have as many else ifs as we like. We only ever have one if and one else, but we can have as many else ifs in between the if and else as we like. So there could be three, there could be four. So I'm going to do a little program that has a couple between so we can see that work. So let's go over to our diagram. Let's get rid of this one, and we're now getting to the stage where the diagrams are going to get a little large, so I may have to shrink some things. So let's get our terminator, our start, and as we did before, we're going to just set num to 6, and then we're going to start testing. We're going to test it for different things. We're going to test it first of all if it's 6, and if it is 6, we're going to print out the value 6. If it isn't 6, we're going to move on down to the next one. We're going to see if it's 5, and if it is 5, we're going to print out let's see, 5 times 2. And if it isn't 5, if it's 4, then we're going to print out of 4 times 3. Are these lined up? It's always difficult to see with parallelograms. I think that may need to go over a little bit. There we go. And I need to zoom out a tiny little bit. And finally, if it's not 6, 5 or 4, if it's something else, what I'm going to do is set the value of num to be equal to 0, and then I'm going to end my program. So this is the structure of the if-else statements. Let's see if I can just zoom in a little bit. And I've got that there. This is going to be the structure of my if, else if, and if statement. So let's manage with the terminators first. I need to move that across. So let's get my arrow. Oops, let's click off it. Get my arrow. Whoops. This is going to start loving it. Okay, there's the first one. So going into the first decision, if it's true, we're going out to that box. If it's false, we're going to that one. Remember, we can't use the third part. We're in our decision. If it's true, we're going out to that one. If it's false, we're going to move to the next one down. If it's true, we're going out. So these are all the if statements here. That's the if, elif, elif, and else. And finally, the no takes us down to there, and that takes us down to the terminator. And what makes this work is when we take the line out from the data, we are going to bring it back into here after the final process. So I need to join these lines to there. A bit wobbly. There we go. And that is our diagram for an if, elif, else with 2 elifs. So let's go over to the pseudocode. Well, no, before we go there, let's actually put the code in. So we need a start. We need a set num to 6. We're going to ask the first question, is num 6? Yes. And we're going to output num. No. We're going to check now, is num 5? If it is, we're going to put output num times 2. We're going to check now if it's 4, is num 4. If it is, we're going to output num times 4. Let's just put a space in this one as well. And finally, if it's none of those, we're going to set num equal to 0, and then we are going to end. So there we go, there's our flow chart. So let's do the pseudocode for this. So let's start off with the same sort of thing. Set num to 6, we're good there, we're good to go. We've got if num is equal to 6, then we output num, so we're fine with that one. Now what we have here is else if. So we're going to manage the first one. We're going to check, is the number equal to 5? And we need to write else if num is equal to 5, then. So that is writing our first else if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to print num times 2. Then we're going to jump down to our next else if statement. We're going to check else if it's 4. Else if num. Now notice that every time I use an else if, I have to check the value of num again. I never do that with the else statement. And I also use then on the end of each else if statement. So this one would be print num times 4. And then we've got the else statement, so it's no. Okay, so if none of these match, that's else. And if that else is there, we need to change the num to 0. And then we hit the end if. And what's happening here is every time I output the number, it does not do the next line in the code, it bounces right down to the end if. So every time I output something, it jumps down to the end if. It doesn't do any of the lines beneath it. So that's the pseudocode. So let's hop over to Python and let's complete that. So bearing in mind we're going to be doing pretty much the same sort of thing. Python, the only difference that we've got really is else if is now elif, which you've used before. So if number equals 6, print num, we're fine up to this point. Then we need to have a new statement, elif, but we can't just leave it on its own. We need to have something to check. Num equals 5, and the colon means my then statement. So what I'm going to do here is print num times 2. Then I'm going to have another elif statement for the 4. Elif num is equal to 4. Then print num times 4. And then I'm into my else statement. And I'm going to set num to 0. And I'm going to keep this print num at the bottom. It is not in my design. I just set the num to 0 and then I end the program. So I'm going to keep this in my design to actually see if it falls through to this value. So the only time it's going to print something out is if it's either 6, 5 or 4. Anything else it's going to have as 0. So if I quickly run that and then do some changes. So num was 6 to begin with, and it's printed num was 6, it's checked if num was 6, it's printed num was 6, and then it's jumped down to here and print num 6 again. So let's change the value to 5. So this time it's going to check if it's 6. It's not going to be, it's going to hit this second line here, print 5 times 2, which should be 10. Ignore that line, ignore that line, ignore that line, ignore that line, and then print out 5. So if I run this program, I should have 10 and 5 as my outputs. And there we go, we've got 10 and 5. This time I'm going to change num for 4. It isn't 6, so it's going to skip to this line. It isn't 5, so it's going to skip to this line. It's 4, so it's going to multiply 4 times 4 would be 16. Then it's going to jump to this line, and it's going to print 16 there and 4 there. So run the module. So I get 16 and 4. And finally, if I set it to any value, let's set it to 25. It's going to check this line, it's not 25, so skip to this line, it's not 25, skip to this line, it's not 25, skip to the else clause, it's going to set num to 0, I'm going to print out a single value of 0. And there we go. So that's worked in Python. Please take note now of the pseudocode versus the Python code. There are just a few differences. We've got the else if, we've got the brackets around the num, we've got the then on the end, and we've got an end if. The rest of it is identical to Python, and notice how this is constructed for an if statement. It's quite a challenge to write these, so you're going to need quite a fair amount of practice.